5th, 2024. I would like to call to order this meeting of the Advisory and Finance Committee, Subcommittee F. We are here for the purpose of discussing the Plymouth Public Schools annual operating budget. I am joined by subcommittee members Dan Green and Brian Dunn. This meeting is being conducted entirely in a virtual setting pursuant to Massachusetts general law. This meeting is being recorded and will be available on PAC TV for the public to view at a later date. There are members of the public here, and at the beginning of the meeting, I would like to invite members of the public who wish to make a public comment the opportunity to speak. Members of the public will be given 3 minutes to speak at the outset of this meeting prior to hearing our presentations from Plymouth Public Schools. Having said that, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak at this time? I see Pat McCarthy is here. Pat, hi, please identify yourself,
Sure.
precinct, and you have 3 minutes to speak. Your time begins now.
Okay, that's fine. Pat McCarthy, precinct 18, vice chair, longstanding town meeting member, about 30 years or so, plus or minus. And I'm just very pro-education minded in this community, and have hopefully the budget situation will go well. I just watched the end of the select board meeting because I didn't see the absolute end the other night. So I understand that there was a meeting between Derek and the vice chair of both committees. So school committee this week, and I didn't know that, and that there's agreement on moving forward to town meeting with a unified approach. But I'm very concerned about the lack of money in the allocated for future or current and future contract negotiations. And my understanding from what I gather from the numbers I've gotten from Kevin Canty and having reviewed some of the data myself is that the school department has set aside 1.2 million of what they were allocated from the town predictions of money coming in. That's sitting going to be in the reserve account, but I'm not towards negotiations, and I know that's been an issue at your recent meetings. So and with the situation at the state level, I'm concerned about the monies. I know there's some good news, and then there's some bad news, and then there's some good news. So from what I've been following. So I'm a senior citizen, obviously. Our 2 sons went to Plymouth schools, and I've always been supportive of public education, even though I never went to one day in a public school in my whole life, including having gone to Regis College, which was all women at the time, which our sons cannot believe I did that, but anyway. So I just want to show my support. I know it costs money. It costs money for services in this town, fire, police, public safety, etc. And we've been the recipient this past year of having to have, I have had to call 911 3 times, and I saw for my husband, and I so appreciate all of the services in this town. And the fire department doesn't get enough credit, the police department, DPW, etc. So it's going to cost more money. So maybe somebody can't go out to dinner one night a month or something, but you don't get anything for free. The town I grew up was in Scarsdale, New York, at the time the richest town in the United States. We lived in the poor section, but we had leaf collection back in the day, and we had trash collection. So I've always known that you pay for what you get. You don't get anything for free. And I just hope we have a very successful town meeting. And thank you for all your effort and time. And I'm just glad that I could Zoom in. Thank you very much.
Pat. Thank you, Pat. Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing and hearing none. I'd like to turn the meeting over to Dr. Campbell, Superintendent of Plymouth Public Schools, for his presentation. Dr. Campbell.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to our subcommittee members and to our school committee members that are here. Mr. Canty, and I'm also joined by Dr. Blaisdell, our school business administrator. So happy to share our proposed FY25 budget. So I'm going to share my screen, and much of what well, if I can, doesn't seem, there we go. Hold on one second. My apologies. Everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So much of what I'm about to share has been presented before, and there are also some recent developments and some conversations that we've had recently, and I will, this is up to our most recent meeting, which took place not too long ago. The proposed budget, I want to provide some context as I go through this. As the community knows, we've gone through some tough fiscal times, and our district is also weathered some numerous budget reductions, and notably, we have been able to supplant those reductions through state and federal grants, and they played a pivotal role. As I've said before, those funds are going away, so we're at this what I call a perfect storm of continued need with decreased funding to do so. So in crafting this proposed budget, which I will go through with you, our focus has been and always is to align with the guidelines set forth by the town. Having said that, that initial proposal that the town left us with some great concerns, and we've had conversations since then, which I'll explain later through this presentation. Trying to find the little arrow here. So as we gathered for this presentation, I just want to provide a quick roadmap for our discussions and go through our FY24 budget process and give a little history and how it was developed, and also mention some of the significant budget drivers behind this budget, which really left us with some of our concerns with the initial guideline that was given, future concerns and priorities, and of course, always willing to answer any questions that anyone has. Since I can't see anyone right now because I have my screen on full view, I'd appreciate it if they could be at the end, but obviously please speak up if you'd prefer to stop me at some point as well. So, as we advocate for essential needs, we're obligated, and I truly believe this, to think of the economic climate that's presented and present a plan that is both responsive to our students and responsible to our community to provide those essential needs. And it's always a hard balance. It's important to develop a budget, I believe, that's responsive and responsible, responsive in that we're, meeting the needs of our students and responsible to the economic forecast that we have. So my administrative team, along with the school committee, has worked very collaboratively to try to keep our costs down and reduce our budgets over the years. And just to kind of highlight that for the community more, because I know that everyone here has heard me say this, but we've had several conversations. Geez, it seems to go back about 5+ years now, and we knew that we were getting to this point, that fiscal cliff of 24. What we didn't know is that COVID would hit as a result of that. But we were committed. School committee was committed to work with the finance committee, the select board, to try to reduce our costs, understanding that revenue would be down, and made a commitment for 2 to 3 years to try to reduce our budget by approximately 1% for 2 to 3 years, assuming all contractual obligations, to avoid an override for an operational budget. We were very fortunate to we have a great relationship with our associations and settled very modest contracts, again with the intent to try to meet within those needs. So, as I said, the district, just like the town, has faced some budgetary challenges since the onset of the pandemic. Multiple budget reductions were implemented due to the declining revenue at the town side. And again, we've been very fortunate to receive federal dollars, CARES Act funds, ESSER funds, which have played a critical role in alleviating the impact of those reductions. I can't imagine where we would be without that. The federal funds were instrumental in maintaining essential programs and services during challenging times. Unfortunately, the federal funds, which we all know have served as a lifeline, have now come to an end. In that aftermath of the pandemic, there are still heightened demands for student supports. Mental health services certainly have not declined. Academic interventions are absolutely necessary, and additional resources are crucial to addressing these evolving needs of our students. And unfortunately, the end of federal assistance is coinciding with continued need for support of our students. So as I mentioned earlier, in crafting our proposed budget, our initial proposed budget, our focus has been on aligning with the town guidelines set forth by the town. And this is the approach we have always taken in my 16 years here. So the table you see here was information provided. Again, this goes back to the fall from our town director of finance. This was all the new revenue resources used to build the FY25 budget. So our guideline was to build a FY25 budget that would assume all future funding needs without exceeding $6,444,000 increase. So to build a budget not exceeding that guideline, we utilize what I commonly refer to as a zero-based budget, really asking our cost center managers, which are principals, our academic coordinators, and directors who have a budget to justify all necessary expenses. In addition to that, we carried over all necessary personnel. So anyone that we need to have put in front of children next year, any support services were carried over in the development of this budget. So as we shared with the school committee as well as the town manager's office, after going through that process, we had a meeting back in late November prior to that initial presentation to the school committee. While that budget allowed us to maintain our current level of services, we really found it very difficult to have any, very little funding to have available for future contract settlements. And I'll get into that in greater detail momentarily. Really, I think, our concerns with the original town guideline was that we could not maintain our current services and budget for future contract negotiations. Our last contract agreements were subject to fall town meeting appropriation, and we really were concerned about the transparency of not requesting a supplemental appropriation for contract settlements. And I'll get into my thinking behind that soon. As I've already mentioned several times, we've relied heavily on state and federal grants for the past 3 years to offset curriculum budget reductions. We made reductions in those areas and used ESSER funds to supplement that, or supplant that, I should say. So when building this year's proposed budget, the initial budget, we asked our academic coordinators to build a budget reflecting all expenses, supplies, materials, subscriptions, textbooks, mentor texts, technology, equipment, things that we need in our classrooms to support our teachers and support our students. With the fall town guideline, the town guideline, we needed to make reductions to our academic coordinators' initial requests, and we did that when building that initial budget. So this shows you our proposed budget on December 4th. This is part of the presentation we did on December 4th. So you can see it was $119 million at the time, $119,934,770. And our budget is comprised largely in salaries, as you would anticipate. We're a business of educators, and our salary dollars is really what drives our budget. 24% of this non-salary dollars, and I'll break that down even further as we go. So contracted services, so you can see here, $73,446,201 for certificated salaries. Is there anyone with a license? So a teachers, specialists, administrators. Clerical salaries, another $3.5 million. Other salary dollars for other positions, 14.4. In contracted services, this includes a wide variety of activities from outside consultants to the services provided by private residential placements for children receiving special education services, transportation services, legal services, translation services for anything that we can't do in-house due to limited staffing in that area. Other expenses you can see is a small amount of $770,657. Those are defined as expenses that are neither durable goods nor traditional services provided by an outside agency. They're more loosely defined because it can encompass a wide variety of areas such as dues and memberships, educational training, conferences, travel expenses as some examples. As you can see, supplies and materials, and this includes all supplies and materials, both educational as well as those for our facilities, is just over $3 million. This initial budget, again, presented on December 4th, shows our budget with insurance for active employees. So as you can see, for active insurance, you're looking at over $18 million. And we know how that drives our budget as a community. And that's something that I wanted reflected in here so you could see that. So this budget, excuse me, my slides on my side are messed up. Okay, my apologies. So this table breaks down our budget and it's increased by object code. So as you can see, non-salary expenditures are up to a greater percentage than salary expenditures, with contracted services being the greatest percentage increase. This slide shows Chapter 70 aid to the town of Plymouth over the past 10 years. So this is state aid to education. We have seen an average 1.42% annual increase over those years, with 0.87% annual increase average since FY20. The most recent increase in FY23 was our largest in recent history of 1.75%. That number is not going to be the same next year. It will not be as much. While there have been talks about increased Chapter 78, the conversations that we've had with the state representative and also looking at the governor's proposed budget, it's unlikely that we will see a significant increase here. This slide, I'm not going to go into great detail on this, but just to illustrate for everyone, we also receive state and federal entitlement grants due to the demographics and the federal and state availability of funds, but really looking at our population of students and it's appropriated on an annual basis, and this is those state and federal grants over time from FY20 to 24. And I'm not going to get into all of these, but these grants, these title grants, entitlement grants, provide services and supports for academically at-risk, impoverished students, English language learners. There's a small amount here for career and vocational technical education, early education, special education. The last series of where it says district total, this will show you of all those grants that we have seen a slight increase on average. So about 3.45% increase since FY20 and only 0.6% since FY22 on an annual basis. So it doesn't keep up, and we rely on these grants also for staff. This is something that all districts utilize, particularly some of the larger grants. So the budget, again, that I first presented to the school committee on December 4th, and I said the concerns with meeting that original guideline is largely driven by these significant fixed costs. And again, when we were initially given that guideline, the thought was to try to utilize approximately 3.4 million to provide a level service budget and then the remaining funds for any settled contracts. So as you can see from the slide, we have 4.8 million, nearly 5 million allocated to simply maintain our current staffing and services. So existing contract advancements, existing staff that were supplanted through grants. Again, we had over a $2 million reduction after leveling our budget last year. So we needed to rely again on those grants. We don't like to do that, but it was necessary. Supplies and materials that were accounted through ESSER. Agricultural schools, it's important for the community to know that if there's a vocational program that we do not provide in our district, a student applies to it and they receive acceptance there, that we are financially obligated to pay that tuition, and those are just over $20,000 a piece. Agriculture, we do not have an agricultural program. We're seeing an increase in students that are attending agricultural schools getting accepted from Plymouth. Certainly not enough to consider adding a program here. It wouldn't be a fiscal savings. However, it is a significant increase budget driver for us moving forward, over $322,000 for next year. $701,000 for special education services, transportation, and tuitions, and almost $500,000 in future contracts for transportation and crossing guards. So these are significant drivers, again, to maintain what we're doing now.
Excuse me for a second.
Yes, of course.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good, good. In the format of this, are you just going to run through the slides, then we come back and question, or give you ask questions, or would you like us to ask questions as you're presenting?
Well, thank you, Mr. Lawler. So initially I said at the end, but if you have a question that you'd like to ask now, that's fine as well.
No, I'll let you continue. Thank you.
I'll try not to be go on too long, so I know that you've seen this as well.
Okay.
I share this. Transportation is something that is really is a large driver in our budget, and we spend approximately $11 million annually for all student transportation. This is general transportation, our yellow buses, special education, homeless transportation, vocational transportation. The information here was extracted from the state end year report from FY22, showing the transportation costs for districts comparable in student population to the Plymouth Public Schools. So I asked Dr. Blaisdell to do this as we worked with our state representative, trying to work with the Department of Education, the Executive Office of Education, to see if we could come up with a proposal that could, bring some financial relief to districts that have extraordinary expenses in transportation. So this slide, as you can see, Plymouth spends, in comparison to these districts, anywhere from 38 to 309% higher per pupil than comparably populated school districts, which is significant. People may ask why, and for us, it comes down to our geography or just land mass. So this slide for the public illustrates how large Plymouth is, with the total land area mass of 96.5 miles. And so we're over 100 square miles when you include our water, but 96.5 square miles. So the outline on this slide is the border of Plymouth drawn to scale, overlaid on the Metro Boston area. So in addition to this expansive geography, which we're all familiar with as residents in Plymouth, Plymouth's road rates make it very challenging for us to transport students in any more efficient way than we currently operate, with a lot of private dirt roads and few roads that intersect east and west. We have made some reductions in we do efficiency studies to try to bring that down. But if we were to do it any further, even though the buses may not be largely populated in some runs, many times there are students that pay for that and they're not on it because they have after school activities and sports, but they're still paying for a spot on the bus. But if we were to collapse any more buses, we would have students well over an hour on a bus, which is something we cannot do. Just to draw our attention to something that's also a critical aspect, I think, that often resides behind the scenes, but plays a fundamental role for us, which is the regular maintenance and funding for regular maintenance of our aging facilities. So, as educators and everyone here, I know, understands how the conditions of physical spaces profoundly impact the overall well-being and academic success of our students. So, unfortunately, aging facilities pose unique challenges. They demand proactive and regular maintenance, and we do our best to invest in ongoing maintenance to preserve that integrity of our buildings. But in July of 21, we contracted with Bureau Veritas to conduct a comprehensive facilities needs assessment, which highlighted both immediate needs and future maintenance needs of our buildings. And we've done everything we can in recent years to utilize ESSER funds when capital funding was unavailable. So, while our buildings are very well maintained, I'm very proud of our dedicated workforce. The age of our buildings is a major concern, and we do everything to keep things running and well maintained. So, aging facilities present unique challenges that can't be ignored, and something that we also, as the town does, face the stark reality that capital improvement projects require dedicated funding, and when that's not available, we face unsettling prospects of deferring essential projects, allowing concerns to escalate in a more complex and costly manner. So just to show some of the capital funding requests that we've received and are asked. So understanding that this is something that, again, the town is in the same situation, but I don't have a solution, unfortunately, but just pointing out that, we're doing everything we can to maintain our buildings so that we don't have significant issues. This is really important to highlight as well. So while our population is pretty it's pretty level right now, and we do have some projections that in the next few years it may go up because of the additional development that's been here. We had AppGEO as a consultant that did geospatial analysis, birth projections for us for redistricting. AppGEO, I believe, is the same contractor that did the mapping for our political precincts in recent years. A great company to work with. But one change is in our demographic is the amount of English language learners. So this graph illustrates our EL students over the last 6 years. You can see in FY19, Plymouth supported 120 EL students, and as of December 4th, I should say, we were supporting 412 students, and it's probably up by now. We see an increase in January, typically the large Brazilian Portuguese presence in our community. Their summer begins in January. We see a lot of move-ins at this time of the year. So I don't have a number, but I'm sure that's up slightly. So that's a 343% increase though since FY19. So, as we embrace the diversity that enriches our classrooms, it's important that we commit to equity and inclusivity that reflects our budgetary considerations. So, we have to keep that in mind as we build our budgets as well. We have not added any additional EL supports, I want to point out, in this budget. There are no additions. I've had people ask me, how did we get to this point? And I mentioned this at our joint meeting. I think we've done a really good job to try to negotiate very conservative cost of living adjustments in our contracts. So as you can see, over these last 5 contracts this is just our educators, our teachers, on average have received a 1.7% increase, and we all know inflation has superseded that even in that period. I believe it was about 2.6%. Just showing again, and this is the challenge that we have, and I mentioned this last year and the year before, as we look to settle our contracts and try to find fair compensation. And I know that the town, we were part of a compensation study back in 2017, and we knew this. Our teachers are paid less well in comparison to many of our neighboring districts. So this slide here shows you, again, this is the districts above Plymouth on this graph, this table, are what they were projected for next fiscal year. The reason we used next fiscal year's budget for those salary dollars in those communities is that's what we're looking at in comparison as we build a projection for contract negotiations. We look at what are people going to be paid next year. We already know what Plymouth is paying this year. We're looking at next year. So as you can see, in comparison, we're below across all these categories. Just to explain this, B1 column, that is an entry-level individual who has a bachelor's degree straight out of school. B top means that they've been here for 11 years with a bachelor's degree. Many times this may be some of our career and vocational technical education teachers that are working on a degree as well. M1 is someone coming in as a first-year teacher with a master's degree. M top means that they're in their 11th year with the master's degree. You can see the next one is essentially is a second master's. CAGS is an advanced graduate degree, and then you have doctorate. So you can see the range there in orange, a difference between 5166 and over almost $14,000 difference. We put some of the benefits because we knew that we were looking at our benefit comparisons as well. And as you can see, there's certainly communities whose benefits are not as good as Plymouth, not as strong. And that really, I think it's more comparable in the B1 category when you look at the true compensation. However, we have very few, if any, new teachers coming in with a bachelor's degree first year that are taking insurance because they're more often than not, they're still being covered under their their family plan. I know that in the previous presentations, I was asked to come up with the number, and I didn't want to, I have a hard time forecasting ahead. I prefer to look at, what, go into contract negotiations in good faith and try to come up with the number, understanding that we have to live within the revenue and the funding that we have. I did do this comparison for the last joint meeting just to show sort of two hypotheticals. The first one being what was on the town's contract negotiation settlement on the town side last time, what that would mean to us. We're large, teachers is the largest bargaining unit. And this is just a comparison for the teachers. The 4% is just what we're seeing across communities. So just to give you an idea, so showing what they proposed town managers to put aside a reserve account for $3.6 million, assuming that we would get 56.5% of that shortfall that we would have, again, maintaining our current level of services. So I just want to give you an update for everyone. As was mentioned prior to me starting this presentation, we have had a meeting with members from the town and the select board. We also have had some discussions with the school committee. We had a meeting Monday night, and I made some public comments, and we had a lot of conversation about the state of affairs, where we are right now, and I made a recommendation. We had a meeting today, this afternoon. This committee has made a vote on this, and it's in support of this recommendation. So the recommendation this afternoon, which was approved by school committee, was to appropriate $118,734,770 for the purpose of maintaining current level of services. Okay, that budget has been carefully formulated to ensure, again, that continuation of essential programs, services, and operational needs. There are no new initiatives in that level service budget. I want everyone to be clear. There are no new initiatives. It is maintaining what we're currently doing today. With that recommendation, we feel strongly that as we go through this, supplemental funding will be required to address any additional financial requirements that may arise as a result of successful conclusion of ongoing contract negotiations, which we will be going through this winter and beyond, most likely. My recommendation, I feel it, I want to explain why I feel this is the best way, which has been supported by the school committee. We did do it. This was the way that we approached it. The last contract, the only contract that I've been a part of as superintendent, but I think, this really highlights it for me. One, the accuracy and precision. I feel that negotiations for contract settlements can be complex, and that final settlement amount may vary from initial estimates. So to give an estimate up front, I think is premature. So requesting a supplemental appropriation after settlements allows a more accurate reflection of the actual costs incurred. Okay, so that approach, I believe, ensures that the budget aligns closely with the real expenses, really promoting financial accuracy. I think embedding an arbitrary number or an estimate in advance may lead to overestimation or an underestimation. The lack of precision, I firmly believe, that can result in a misallocation of resources and potential budget shortfalls. Delaying the budgetary allocation for contract settlements until negotiations are concluded enables decision makers to have a clearer understanding of the financial implications. This information, I think, is crucial for making informed choices about resource allocation and prioritizing expenditures based on those actual settlement amounts, when we really have to start making informed decisions. I also believe that requesting supplemental appropriations provides a transparent process, as it openly communicates the need for additional funding and the reasons behind it. This transparency fosters public trust, I believe, in demonstrating we're trying to be responsible financial management to ensure that all stakeholders, are aware of the specific budget adjustments related to contract settlements. So it, and it provides some flexibility and adaptability so that we can respond to the actual needs that arise afterwards and really have an understanding of what our true needs will be as we make that request. To mention that, again, we are concerned. These are things that I've mentioned for the last couple of years, are trying to reduce our needs for contract transportation. We're not eligible for reimbursement like small regional school districts receive. We have an increased need for supporting English language learners. Again, there's no additional funding in this budget, something that we will continue to prioritize as opportunities arise. But instructional support and translation and interpretive services are something that we need to prioritize. Facility improvements, our aging facilities and the continued need for capital there, and negotiations, certainly. And related to that is the hiring and retaining of staff. I'm not going to go into great detail about this, but you've all heard me say this. It's getting harder to retain and to attract staff because of where we are financially and when people can make more money nearby. But that is my recommendation, which was supported by the school committee this afternoon, again, to provide a level service budget with the understanding that we will be seeking a supplemental appropriation from the town upon the conclusion of successful negotiations.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. We're also joined by Dr. Adam Blaisdell, who's Plymouth Public Schools business manager, and I also see Michelle Badger here and Catherine Jackson. Michelle is the chair of Plymouth School Committee. Catherine is the secretary of the Plymouth School Committee. I just wanted to get the titles right. Before I open this up for questions, Dr. Blaisdell, Ms. Badger, Ms. Jackson, do you have anything that you'd like to add to Dr. Campbell's presentation?
And I'm not sure if we really add anything except for that, the school committee, as Dr. Campbell already said, we voted earlier today, and it was approved 5-1, which is important. We were missing one member, but we are all in agreement that this is our budget for what we need right now. It's not the budget for what we need moving forward in the future. And so that's kind of where we stand. And if I keep going on, I'm just going to restate all the things that Dr. Campbell already did. But thank you for your time on this. I know it's a lot of work and a lot of time to go through our budget and all that you do. So I really do appreciate all of you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have anything that Dr. Blaisdell, I saw you shaking your head. Ms. Jackson, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
No, nothing. I think Michelle and Dr. Campbell both stated everything in enough detail. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I agree with both Kathy and Chris and Michelle. So no, not right now. Thank you.
All right. Having said that, does anyone on the subcommittee have any questions for Doctors Campbell or Blaisdell regarding the budget? If you could do me the favor of raising your digital hand, it would just make it easier for me to see and manage kind of who's on deck. Mr. Green, you have your digital hand raised. Please feel free to ask your question.
So just for clarification, we have arrived at an approval of the original select board proposed budget. Is that correct?
Correct.
118,734,770. Okay. And we have, and everything, we've talked about contemplates the 1.2 still sitting in the salary reserve account.
That 1.2 was the recommendation of the town manager, which was supported.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Great. All right. I just wanted to confirm that before we go any forward. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mr. Green. Mr. Lawler, do you have any questions? You're muted, Tim. Tim, you need to turn up your volume.
Boom, there we go. Technology. Can we go back to that slide, the budget review loss data sheet, please?
Let me share my screen and see which. Sorry, Mr. Lawler, what was it? Which one?
It was, let's see, you were talking about revenue loss. There was a sheet there that had numbers that indicated revenue loss.
Stop me when you-
No. It's budget review revenue loss sheet.
Budget review. I'm literally going through all the slides.
Boom. Back.
Oh, sorry. This one here?
Back. Yeah, right there.
Okay.
Okay, gotcha.
There's a
Just
budget.
Yes, just to clarify.
Sure.
By the way, from the cost center account detail form that I have that lists all the categories of revenue spent, and then the bottom line on that was 119 934 770, and that is less the $800,000 that's aside right now over in the town side. Is that that lost revenue account to avoid additional reduction in force? That 800, are you going to spend that between now and June 30th of 2024?
Very good question. I have no doubt that we will need to spend that, Mr. Lawler.
Okay, so in general accounting principles, GAAP, if you're going to spend that 800,000, that becomes part of your budget number.
Okay.
So I question the validity of why that's on significant budget drivers, 4.8 million loss.
When we were, this is the way that it was explained to us from the town. When that was approved, that $800,000 sits in a reserve account, which we request access to when we demonstrate that we need that for personnel purposes. I think Mr. Canty has his hand raised and wants to explain this, and I don't know if I can turn it over to you, Mr. Canty, and then.
Sure. I can take the heat for this, Chris, since I'm the one that made the motion last year. So when we made that motion and it was approved by this predecessor to this subcommittee and then the FinCom and then eventually town meeting, it did take the money out of the school's budget. So, and it was stated at the time at the equivalent to this meeting last year that they anticipated that they would use some or all of that money in this fiscal year that we're in. But the purpose of salary reserve is finance department and its usage. Last year when we were in guidelines were different. We were trying to maintain excess levy capacity at that time. And the schools were projecting after a couple rounds of cuts that if they made a further cut to their budget, that they'd have to lay off a number of staff. I think it was something like 18 to 32 different staff at some point, if memory serves, depending on whether they were certificated or not. So the money was put there to avoid that. And the thinking was if they had other money in their budget that they could move around to pay salaries, like say supplies and materials were lower or tuition. We didn't know what OSD was going to be at the time. They'd spend that money that's in their budget first, and the salary reserve would be sort of the last bastion to prevent a layoff from happening. And that's what that was done for. But by doing that move, we anticipated if they didn't use all that money, we could get some of it to go to free cash and help in this upcoming fiscal year. But if they did need to use it, it would be there. But it was technically, for all intents and purposes, taken out of their budget and put into the finance department's budget, not to be used by finance, but to be used for the exact purpose that I just elucidated. So I do think there's, there is validity to saying that it was taken out of their budget, because it was, but there's, explaining that it was sequestered there for that purpose is valuable, but it is a budget driver for them if they're looking to try and make that up this year and restore that to their budget. It does technically move the needle on their side of the ledger, because it's going from finance, that 800, to schools.
Yeah,
And
but
when we
Kevin,
ran our,
but that 800, Kevin,
Yep.
Chris just stated that they will be using the 800 by the end of this fiscal year. So,
Right.
and by the way, when you did that, which was a great move, the schools, you just can't take $800,000 out of the school budget and expect things to go upside down. I mean, they need that 800,000, and the schools are going to take that 800,000, right? And I'm just trying to think is it's the school budget right now is 118,734,770. You throw the 800,000 back in, and all things are hunky dory for 119,934,770, which they had before. I don't know. It's just it's a confusing number that just centers me a little off. I don't know why we just don't take that 800,000 right now and just call it part of the spend budget for this year. I don't know why we don't do that. I don't know why the big mystery of holding that captive is a captive number when it's actually going to be a number that's going to be spent this year. It just doesn't make sense.
It hasn't been spent yet. That's the issue. And and you mentioned GAP. The schools don't, and municipal services don't use GAP.
I understand. I understand, but in a normal world, right? That 800,000 is going to be spent this year. It's going to be spent this year, and if it's going to be spent this year, it's part of the budget. So we're just playing around with a specific number. I'll let them play around with it. That's fine. But I know that that 800 is going to be spent this year because the school department needs that money. You just can't take it away from them, and they're going to use that money on salaries. And Chris has just confirmed that they are. And I just want to just state for the record that in this particular slide, it doesn't make sense to have that 800 in that spot. Period. For the record.
I just, to come to the defense of the schools for a bit, they did make it very clear all the way back a year ago that they were going to spend most, if not all, of that money. And they reiterated that just a moment ago. So I think I don't know that playing around is the word I would use, but they have to play by the rules, which are that it's in salary reserve and that money is spent in a different way than money within their budget. But every year the budget is put together new, right? If we didn't do anything, that money being in salary reserve wouldn't just stay in salary reserve in fiscal year 25 without it being put there. Every year, and you build next year's budget based on this year's budget that you're in, but it's a conscious choice where money in a budget gets allocated. It wasn't their choice last year to take it out of their budget. It was the FinCom's choice to do, or this subcommittee's choice, which was then supported by FinCom as a broader committee and by town meeting as a body. But when they built their budget this year, the schools, they put it back in because that was their intention last year, and that's their intention this year.
And when we did our FY25 budget, as Kevin said, well, first of all, when we did that, we developed our salaries based upon what we know our salaries are going to be based upon our current staff today. There are staff that are going to leave and we'll have to replace them because you can't leave a third grade classroom unattended. You have to have a teacher there. But we built FY25 for salaries based upon who we have for staff today and also when we stepped them up, but based on the steps. And as Kevin said, there are expenses this year that we've had that, you know, you plan for certain placements for special education. And as Kevin said, that was 14.7% increase over last year. And there have been kids that have moved in that we didn't expect that had some pretty heavy duty placements. So that money will be used this year. And when we developed our budget, as Dr. Campbell said, we started from zero and figured out, okay, what kids do we have in placements? What are our salaries? What are our contracted services? So the town has been great, honestly, and truly working with them. They know that we've asked them how to get it when we need it, and they've been very, very upfront and honest in regards to use it for salaries, and this is what you have to do. And it honestly and truly has not been. The conversations have been very, very easy to have and very supportive. So it's working, and I understand, Mr. Lala, where you're coming from. As Mr. Canty said, we just don't operate like the rest of the world.
Understood.
I also want to emphasize that we are committed to working if we have money that we're not going to spend, we're not going to spend it just frivolously. I want to, like, for example, when the town back in FY20 for the FY21 budget, I believe, reappropriated 1.9 million for COVID expenses. And then the federal government came to our rescue and there was CARES Act money. We gave that money back. We did not spend that money. So we're not looking to spend money where money doesn't need to be spent. We're committed to trying our best to provide the same level of services based on the current needs of our students and understand that we have, you know, only so much money available through revenue and so forth. So we're committed to, and again, as Dr. Blaisdell said, we've been working very collaboratively with the town on that, and we'll continue to.
There seems to be a mystique or an aura floating around right now in the fact of your last statement, Dr. Campbell. And it's you will be seeking a supplemental amount of monies. Well, to add that into your dissertation here, your presentation, I'm sorry, presentation, that leaves an open space. So do you have any idea, even a ballpark, of what you might be seeking as a supplemental amount to come back to?
Again, as I said the other night, Mr. Lawler, when we had the joint meeting, I can't give you a hard number. I can tell you, as I demonstrated in the slide in terms of comparisons, what we're seeing, and without getting into, we haven't negotiated yet. So our job is to try to negotiate a fair contract, and understanding that whatever we agree to, we're going to have to live within the means of the money that is available. And we're going to do everything we can to compensate our workforce in a way that is fair and comparable to our local communities as best we can. I can't give you a hard number, and I know that that's frustrating, but I can tell you that I think it's going to be a significant number. Having said that, I think this approach, as I said, allows us time. You know, we could be fortunate to, and I've said this before, we could be fortunate to see you know, a decline in our personnel because of additional retirements. We haven't seen that in recent years, but there's a cost savings there, which we wouldn't need to ask for as much money.
Excuse me, Dr. Campbell. On that particular subject, on retirements of teachers, you obviously have a schedule of when that might happen. So you forecast that in your numbers anyways, right?
I can tell you last year when we made the reduction and had to make a determination of what we would project for retirements, we overestimated that and we didn't meet that number. So it's hard to say that the teachers can announce, they don't have to give us a large notice. We don't have a deadline that says by June 30th prior to the next year or any date where or an educator or anyone who works for us has to give their notice of retirement. So it's hard to do that. You look at projections, you can look at how long someone's worked for you, but that is not an easy number to give. And I can tell you, in the last few years, we have not had as many retirements to incur savings in personnel dollars with new hires. So, we could give a number, but it's going to be but we've taken that into consideration up until building this budget. Okay, so
Okay. And I can appreciate that, but were you really that far off in your estimates?
Last year, yes.
Okay. That happens.
We looked at historicals and kind of looked at what we had seen over the years,
Yeah.
and with the actual number last year, I don't know off the top of my head, was much lower than what we had projected.
Okay. Let's get back, Dr. Campbell, to the supplemental, and we've spoke one-on-one, you and I, many times, along with Dr. Blaisdell. And I've got that type of personality when I grab onto something, I don't let go. And right, wrong, and different. And to try to get a number out of the school budget as to where you're going is a frustrating situation, because hey, we don't know what's coming at us. The school budget takes 62% of the total budget of the town revenues. Take that to the bank. So that's a huge number, huge responsibility for us to throw a dart at when the target is moving around and we can't get at it. And I think that's why I was so adamant the other night when you and I were going back and forth on this thing. You must have you had a slide in there on the scenarios on the negotiations. If they went this way or they went that way, this would mean this and this would mean that. Can you bring that up?
Again. So I want to point, because I was asked that question, so I tried to prepare something, but understanding that, there's a couple of things. One, there's what is settled and what is available in terms of funding. And so the two that I presented here, one is from was a town agreement with a group, and just what that would mean for our teaching workforce, okay? Because that's the largest bargaining unit. So just to give you an idea, that number is, we know we don't have that. I'm trying to give you sort of a perspective of what that number would be, right? The other one on the right is what we're seeing across the state in terms of settled contracts, which is about 4%, okay? We need to go into negotiations. We need to bargain in good faith and do all that. So having conversations about what that number will be outside of that is not what I prefer. I prefer to go in there and try to work with our associations to do that. But at the same time, again, we have to understand that whatever we agree to, whatever the school committee agrees to and ultimately is adopted as the contract, we are going to have to live with. We can make a recommendation moving forward. Doesn't mean it's going to get supported by the town, whether it's fits within that or not. And that's a decision we're going to have to make. But we need time to go through negotiations. We may be able to, hypothetically, let's say we get, like 5 years ago we had 100 teachers leave and we were able to save money. I can't forecast that now. So we will do everything we can within this level service budget, as things arise, and this came up, the question the other night, if there's a position that opens up and we find that we, or there's people that move and we can collapse things, we do everything we can to try to live within our means and to save money where we don't need to spend it. I feel very strongly that the budget that has been presented and supported by the school committee is based on the staffing we need to educate our kids, the supports that we need to support our teachers and students, mental health, educationally and otherwise, as well as all those fixed costs that I mentioned that drive a large part of our budget. We'll go through negotiations. We're going to come within a number. I can't tell you what it will be. I just give you 2 examples. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to make a decision. We being the school committee with a recommendation from me of what we go, and what that number may be available at town. But I can't give you an answer to that yet. This is the way we approached it before. It was with the fall appropriation. And again, the school department, school committee is committed to doing everything we can to be fiscally responsible and transparent with where we're spending our money. I can't give you a specific number, but these are the hypotheticals I gave the other night and this afternoon.
I'm going to give my brain a rest. Anyone else have any more questions?
I was just going to ask you, Tim, if you had any follow-up questions for the superintendent.
I do, but I'm going to hold them back right now. I'm going to see if anyone else has any questions.
Mr. Green, Mr. Dunn, do you have any questions for either Dr. Campbell or Dr. Blaisdell?
I mean, not really. I think one of my questions would be if the supplemental funding doesn't go through, is the plan then that we have to lay off 60 people?
If we did not have a supplemental budget to support the contract, there would be some reductions. What that number would be, Mr. Dunn, I'm not sure. I guess it would depend on what that ultimate number is. Any sort of what arises through the remainder of this year. But yeah, there would be, if we can't meet our contractual needs, we're going to have to make reductions. What that number would be is uncertain at this point.
Thank you.
Mr. Canty, you have your hand raised. You're muted, Kevin.
Thank you. I do. I just wanted to add on to Dr. Campbell's explanation there. I mean, so the select board's budget is putting 1.2 aside for the schools in the salary reserve. So just want to emphasize that. I know it was talked about earlier, but that means that whatever the salary number is, they're not going to be starting from 0 for that supplemental appropriation. The school side has 2.4 in that salary reserve for our contracts. It was always anticipated that both sides would likely have to come to the table in October for some amount of supplemental appropriation. We are optimistic that the town side will have to be lower than the school side. But the fact that there's already money towards that means that they're going to know what the money on hand is. They're going to know, and we're going to know in October more about, how things are going over that fiscal year once it's started. Any surprises that have come, any further state aid that's come through. There's a number of things that will be clearer in October. That number is going to be your contract number. Contracts are going to be settled by October. So it's possible by putting that 1.2 aside in salary reserve for the schools, it's going to be there in this fiscal year coming up. And if for some reason their negotiations take longer, we can contribute to it further in the next fiscal year as well, so that we're building towards that. But I think it is important to highlight that we are starting with some money set aside. I agree that you wouldn't want to put aside like every dollar you have for it, because then that's not a great negotiating position to take. It's like, oh, what's that secret pile of money over there that's publicly available and everybody knows about? But what this does is by putting some of that money aside, it makes it easier for taxpayers as well, because they won't have this huge uptick come October. We're kind of easing into it. The town is taking a different path towards its fiscal policy than it's taken for generations. So this is a new way of thinking that I think will improve operations and on both town and school side, and make it better for our employees and our residents. But we've always anticipated that there would be some need for supplemental money in the fall, and we anticipate as well, going into the select board and the schools committee and school administration, going into this budget as a united front to try and pitch that it meets the current and near future needs of Plymouth school and town side. I would anticipate we would also be looking to come as a united front in October to try and get the supplemental appropriations that we need for any contracted settlements at that time. So this is hopefully the beginning of a more collaborative process than has previously existed between town and schools. Not pointing any fingers at either. I think there's blame and credit on both sides for efforts to make that or not make that over time. But this is a new approach and this is a new day, but I think it's a good indication of what the future is going to hold for both sides.
Thank you. Mr. Green, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, just one point of clarification on the, potential scenario slide that we looked at. There was a reserve amount quoted on that slide. It was just north of $2 million. I was just curious what that number came from, if that was an earlier reserve number versus the 1.2.
Thank you. So that hypothetical salary reserve request on that slide was looking at the town manager's initial recommendation to put aside that $3.6 million for future contract settlements, and looking at again, when doing that hypothetical, what percentage of the revenue has been, the additional revenue or available revenue has been contributed to the school department budget. So looking at that and splitting that at 56.5%. So that's 56.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Bizzarro, I see you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Campbell, for your presentation. I have a question regarding the negotiation. Is that annual?
No, we typically will negotiate 3-year contracts.
Okay. And then a follow-up question would be, has the bargaining unit had any appetite for including any kind of tools that in terms of forecasting, right? So for instance, if you would put in some requirements on the bargaining unit to say, by this date, you need to tell us, who's gonna retire, for example, as I heard some of the discussion. Are there any things in there that you can negotiate with the bargaining unit to help you and the administration forecast going forward, obviously?
Certainly something that's not something that exists in our existing contracts. It's not common, but it does. I have seen some language in contracts in other districts that have made sort of deadlines or requests, and that can work to your advantage sometime. But nothing we haven't, I can't get into negotiations, but it's not something we've discussed.
Mr. Pizzaro, do you have a follow-up?
No further follow-up. I just was hoping that that would help the administration in their negotiations. It's a non-dollar number kind of negotiation piece, right? It's just something to add to help you guys forecast in the future. Thank you.
I think we've been, our educating, our workforce has been historic. I've been here for 16 years, and I think people have been very open with their intentions and when they intend to retire. And we typically get those letters in advance. So I have good faith in our sort of senior staff that are near retirement, that they would give us ample notice so that we could use that for any kind of projections, and look for that as well, because we have a good relationship with them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Pizarro? I'll take that as a no. Dr. Campbell, I have one question for you. Understanding, and this connects to the transportation piece of the budget. Understanding that transportation is a major driver of the budget, and that it's a huge cost. Has there ever been any thought given to regionalizing Plymouth and Carver, not only for transportation, but a regionalization would also provide Carver students with the opportunity to attend some of our Voc Tech programs, understanding that Carver has a pretty strong infrastructure with a middle school, an elementary school, and a high school now, so we wouldn't necessarily be receiving students from Carver for academics, but we do have a strong Voc Tech program, and that would allow some I don't know, I guess cross-pollination, if you will, for students going towards success and going towards student future, and then it would certainly help us with reimbursement from the state for transportation. Has any thought ever been given to that?
Sure, I'm happy to answer that question. So as you may know, that regionalization here with Plymouth Carver Regional School District ended in the late 80s. In order to do that, there needs to be an agreement between both communities, both Plymouth and Carver. I can't speak for Carver, but I am pretty certain that they have no interest in going back to regionalization. Dr. Blaisdell and I actually have a meeting with them to look at transportation. We actually have, we're looking to work with other communities to see what we can do in terms of collaborative transportation, collaborative purchasing, that sort of thing. So we're always looking at ways to do that. But I would not be very optimistic that we would be looking at Carver having any interest in going back to a regionalization. I think we'll continue to look at ways to make our transportation more efficient, less expensive, and I think through collaborative purchasing of transportation services. I think we've made some efforts using ESSER funds just last year to take over one of our charter routes. That saves us over $150,000 to $175,000 annually. It's not a huge difference, but we're doing everything we can to look at that. We're going to continue to look at a study of what it would take to eventually take over transportation and meet with other districts that have done so, and what was the process behind that. We're a large district, much larger than those that have done that, but we're committed to continuing to look at that. Is there a way that we could tier that in, any way to make savings? And we'll just continue to do everything we can to bring that cost down. It really is, as I call it, the non-educational dollars, critical to us to get our kids to school, especially when we have 2 middle schools that you can't walk to. So there's a large need there as well, but we're committed to doing everything we can to try to bring that cost down and be more efficient. I've gone on a little bit, but
no, that's okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Lawler, I'm going to bring it back to you. Is your brain sufficiently rested? Would you like to ask your questions?
The brain has officially cooled down. I got it. No, I'm all set. I am all set. I'm looking forward to working with the school budget and moving forward with this. I know there's been some frustrating moments. There's been a lot of communication again behind the scenes, and it's all about the kids. We got to make sure that the kids' education is a huge part of Plymouth. If we don't have great schools, I mean, not good schools, great schools, we are not going to attract people to Plymouth. That is the bottom. I mean, like, it's the top line. Sorry, it's the top line. So it is all about that. And I just wanted to state that for the record. I mean, I am all about schools. I am all about giving the money, making the schools great, superior. I guess we should have great schools at a net cost of $26,000 per student. We should, but we're getting there, and things are moving in that direction. So thank you so much for your time and effort.
Thanks, Mr. Lawler. Before Mr. Dunn, Mr. Green, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Just to speak quickly, I really appreciate everyone's effort to kind of pull this together. I think that's the fourth time I've heard that presentation, and it gets better every time. But there's a lot of thought that's being put into this, and I in no way think that this is anybody overreaching to any extent. And I think it's people just trying to get by with the parameters that are given. And hopefully we can make it all work out. So let's just leave it with that.
Then before I make a motion, I just want to add that and Tim, maybe this will kind of help you understand things a little bit. Just from a historical perspective, I am a graduate of Plymouth Public Schools. I graduated from Plymouth Carver Regional High School in 1982, and the education that I received in Plymouth was always top-notch. I had a great experience going through Plymouth schools. The memories that I take away from that are very valuable and very precious to me. I recently learned that my high school senior English teacher, Marie Durden, just passed away on January 1st. She was a phenomenal teacher. She was very energetic. I loved being in her classroom. I was able to come back and work in the Plymouth schools for a period of time. When Marie became a colleague, she was not just a colleague, but she became a mentor and a friend. Her loss has been deeply felt. Plymouth schools not only prepared me for college, but it prepared me for 2 advanced degrees and a role in educational leadership myself. So I can honestly tell you that the education that Plymouth offers is a quality education, and one that students now and in the past can look back on with a lot of affection and a lot of pride. So having said that, I would like to make the motion that Budget Subcommittee F recommend to the Advisory and Finance Committee to adopt the following recommendation to town meeting: to approve the school budget consistent with the Select Board's recommendation of $118,734,770, to approve the Medicare budget consistent with the Select Board's recommendation of $329,434, and to approve the out-of-district transportation budget consistent with the Select Board's recommendation of $80,040. And there is, just as an aside, to remind everyone that there is $1.2 million that is going into salary reserves for the schools for collective bargaining. Do I have a second for the motion?
Second.
Mr. Dunn has seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I just want to thank everyone for pulling this together. And obviously we're gonna have to come back, but I am still a little concerned about the contracts coming up. I was in Newton yesterday for a while on the line there, and I obviously, like, we're not close to that situation now, but I don't want to even touch that situation here. So I think it's important to make sure that we do set aside everything that we can for contracts coming up, and especially since the rest of this town employees had that $4,000 bump and the teachers haven't gotten that. We looked at obviously Mr. Campbell's slides, and I know we had some discussion about next fiscal year versus this fiscal year and what the comparison is. But even if you added 4%, even if you added 10% to all of those numbers, we're still not on par with surrounding communities. So I'm obviously going to vote for this, but I think that's just a concern that I have going forward.
Thank you, Brian. Any other discussion on the motion? Doctors Campbell and Blaisdell will understand this. This is the hardest part. It's the wait time or the think time that happens in the classroom.
You do that well, Mr. Zuperoli. I think I agree with that. It's important.
Thanks. Before I call for the vote, this is the last opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment? Reminding again that you'll have 3 minutes to make your comments known. Hearing and seeing none, I'd like to call for the vote. I'm going to do this through roll call because we are on Zoom. Alphabetically, Mr. Dunn, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Green
Yes.
and Mr. Lawler.
Yes.
And I will add my yes vote to that, making this unanimous. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your effort and your support of the budget for Plymouth Public Schools. Brian, as you said, this is just the beginning of what's probably going to be a little bit more of a conversation, but I think we are off to a good start. Mr. Canny, thank you for joining us. Your perspective is very valuable. Ms. Badger, thank you for joining us. And Ms. Jackson, thank you as well.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to echo what you said, Mr. Zuperoli, about your support in this process to all of you, and also Mrs. Zuperoli, if you could send me the name of your teacher. I know that the school committee recognizes teachers that and educators and staff that we've lost. So we would be honored to do that at a future school committee meeting.
Certainly, I'll do that. Yep.
Thank you.
In that case, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Dunn makes the motion.
Second.
Have a second? Who's second?
Tim Lawler.
Tim. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Dunn, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. We are adjourned at 5:26.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good